The most expensive relationship of my life didn't cost me what it cost because she was Colombian. It cost me because I spent 7 months ignoring 8 things that any adult, anywhere on earth, should have seen coming. That's the part nobody wants to hear, because it's easier to blame a country than to admit you drove past every warning sign with your eyes open, foot on the gas. I'm Luke. I've spent the last 7 years moving between cities in Latin America, and I've watched a lot of men, including a younger, dumber version of me, walk straight into the same wall and then limp away telling the same wrong story about it. By the end of this, you're going to know the 8 signs that the person you're with is running your wallet instead of loving you. Not signs that live in an accent or a passport, signs that live in behavior. Once you can actually see them, you can't unsee them, and that's worth more than anything I could tell you about which neighborhood to rent in or which visa to get. If you're considering doing something similar, moving down here, dating down here, or you just want to know what it's actually like, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let me take you back to Medellin, because that's where I learned all of this the slow, stupid, expensive way. This wasn't my first time in the city. By the time I met Catalina, I'd already done one long stretch there. I knew the neighborhoods, I knew how the days flowed, I thought I understood how the place worked, and that confidence was exactly the problem. First-timers are careful because everything's unfamiliar and a little intimidating. It's your second or third trip when you feel like you've cracked the code that you get sloppy. That's when your guard drops. That was me. I'd taken a 1-bedroom in Provenza, $1,400 a month, which back then was toward the higher end for that pocket of El Poblado. I was paying a premium for the walkability, for being able to roll out of bed and be sitting in a decent cafe in 90 seconds. I could have paid half that in Laureles and gotten more space. But I wanted the convenience, and if I'm honest, I wanted the version of the city that comes pre-packaged for people like me. That matters to the story, so hold on to it. Why I came back that particular time is simple and a little embarrassing. The first stretch had been good to me, and I wanted more of it. Medellin in that era had a pull. The weather that never changes, the ease of the days, the sense that life was somehow cheaper and softer than the one I'd left behind in the States. I'd been bouncing around by then, a few months here, a few months there, and Medellin felt like a place I could finally exhale. I came back looking for comfort, which, again, matters, because a man who arrives somewhere specifically looking to be comforted is a man walking around with a soft spot showing, and soft spots get found. I met Catalina at a rooftop spot off the Parque Lleras end of things. She was sharp, funnier than me, quicker than me, the kind of person who makes you feel like you're more interesting than you actually are. And here's the first thing I need you to understand, because everything else falls apart if you get this wrong. None of what happened later was written on her face that night. She wasn't a cartoon, she wasn't a type, she was a specific, intelligent, charming individual, and the fact that I keep insisting on that is the whole point of this video. The men who leave here saying they're all like that learned nothing, because the person who took them wasn't a they. She was a her, singular, and the signs were in what she did over time, not in where she was from. For the first month, it was honestly one of the better stretches I'd had down there. We'd get arepas at a little place near my apartment that made them the right way, the ones with the egg inside, and she'd walk me through parts of the city I'd somehow never bothered to see even on my earlier stay. A Sunday up in the green hills past Envigado, a night out in Laureles that had none of the gringo bar gloss of El Poblado. She introduced me to her version of Medellin, and it was warmer and more real than the one I'd been renting. I remember thinking I'd finally done it right, that after a couple of years of short, disposable encounters, I'd stumbled into something with actual weight to it. And that feeling, that quiet finally, is worth flagging on its own, because a scarcity of real connection makes you a much easier mark. When you've decided the good thing is rare, and you believe you've finally found it, you will explain away almost anything to keep it. I was primed. I'd spent 2 years priming myself. Now, before I get into it, I have to lay down the thing that makes all of this genuinely hard to see. When you earn in dollars and you're dating in a city where the median wage is a fraction of what you make, there is going to be an economic gap. That gap is not sinister, it's just math. The person with more tends to pay for more, and that can be completely healthy and warm and normal. I paid for most of our dinners. I'd have done that anywhere, with anyone, because I made more money and I liked doing it. So understand, the asymmetry itself is not the red flag. If you come away from this thinking, paying for stuff means you're being used, you've missed it entirely. The asymmetry is the fog. The signs are the shapes moving inside the fog. Learning to tell the difference between generosity and being farmed, that's the entire skill, and it took me 7 months and a real chunk of money to build even a little of it. So let me walk you through what I should have seen. The first sign is the one I'd put at the top of the list for anyone, in any country. Money moves in exactly one direction, and the asks don't stay the same size. They grow. In the beginning it was nothing. A covered dinner here, a cab there. The normal stuff a guy who's doing fine picks up without thinking. But somewhere around month 2, the requests started to have a shape to them. Could I help with her phone bill this month? Then it wasn't the phone bill, it was a course she wanted to sign up for. Then the course became a deposit on a new apartment she needed to move into fast. Each one, on its own, was defensible. That's the trap. Every single ask is reasonable in isolation. It's only when you line them up on a timeline that you see the line goes up and to the right, and it never, not once, comes back down. Healthy relationships have money flowing both ways, even when the amounts are lopsided. She covers a lunch. She buys you a little thing because it reminded her of you. The direction reverses sometimes, even if the size doesn't. With Catalina, in 7 months, the direction never reversed, not once. I didn't notice, because no single transaction was alarming. You have to watch the pattern, not the payment. The second sign is subtler, and it's the one that got the most money out of me. The recurring emergency. There is always a crisis, and the crisis is always urgent, and the timing is always just a little too clean. Her mother needed a medical procedure. A cousin was in trouble. Her phone got stolen, twice. Rent was suddenly due early. And here's what I want you to really sit with, because this is the mechanism. An emergency shuts down your judgment on purpose. When someone you care about says, "My mom is sick and we need the money by Friday," you don't sit there running a cost-benefit analysis. You'd feel like a monster. That's exactly why it works. The emergency isn't just a way to get money. It's a way to get money while making you feel like checking would make you a bad person. I never verified a single one of those crises. Not one. And I'm not telling you to demand hospital paperwork from someone you love. I'm telling you that a pattern of urgent, unverifiable, perfectly timed emergencies is data. And I threw the data away every time because caring about her felt incompatible with being skeptical. Those two things are not incompatible. That's the lesson. Let me make one of these concrete, because in the abstract it's easy to insist you'd never fall for it. The phone. Around month 3, hers got stolen. Snatched off a table, she said, at a cafe down in the Centro. She was shaken. I believed her, because why on earth wouldn't I? And I replaced it. A nice one, no hesitation. 6 weeks later, it happened again. Same story, different cafe. And even then, even the second time, with the pattern sitting right there in the open, my first thought wasn't, this is a pattern. It was, Medellin can be rough, poor girl, terrible luck twice. I reached for the excuse before I'd even finished reading the situation. That's how fast it happens. It's not a decision, it's a reflex. The big one came later. A deposit on an apartment she suddenly, urgently needed. First and last month, plus a fee. Several $1,000s, needed within days, or she'd lose the place. I wired it. I never saw the apartment. I want you to sit with that plainly, because when I say it out loud, now it sounds insane, and it should. I sent thousands of dollars for a home I was never once inside. In the moment though, wrapped in urgency and affection, and my own need to be the guy who could fix things, it didn't feel insane at all. It felt like love. The third sign I can only see now, looking back with a clear head. Her warmth tracked the calendar. When money was needed, she was incandescent, attentive, affectionate, planning our future, the whole thing. And in the stretches when nothing was being asked for, there was a coolness that I kept explaining away as stress, or her being tired, or me being needy. I actually started to be able to predict it, without admitting to myself that I was predicting it. The temperature would climb, and I'd brace, because I knew something was coming. That's a horrible thing to realize you knew. Affection that spikes right before a request and cools right after it isn't affection responding to you. It's affection responding to your account balance. Real feeling isn't perfectly correlated with need. Hers was, and some animal part of my brain had clocked it months before the rest of me was willing to say it out loud. The fourth sign is one I'd tell every guy who's dating seriously anywhere in the world. After months together, I had almost never entered her actual life. The family that needed all this help, I met her mother exactly once, briefly, in a way that felt staged. The cousin in trouble, I never met at all. Her close friends stayed at a polite arm's length. I had built an entire relationship with a woman whose real world I was funding, but never allowed to walk into. And I told myself that was cultural, that families are private, that I was being respectful by not pushing. Some of that's even true. You should be respectful, and you don't get to demand access to someone's whole world in month 3. But there's a difference between privacy and a wall. When the specific people whose emergencies are costing you money are the exact people you never get to meet, that's not privacy. That's set design. The people who cost me the most were characters I never once saw on stage. I want to pause here, because if you're watching this, and something in your own situation just went cold and tight in your chest, I want to know how many of you are seriously thinking about doing something like this, moving down here, starting over somewhere new. Drop the city you're thinking about in the comments. I read all of them, and honestly, the comments on these are half the reason I still make them. Okay, let me talk about what men actually get wrong, because the signs are only half of it. The other half is the story we tell ourselves on the way in, and the story we tell ourselves on the way out. Both are usually wrong. Here's the 5th sign, and it's a clean one. You're effectively managing her finances, but you never once see hers. I was funding courses and deposits and emergencies, and in 7 months I had no real picture of what she earned, what she spent, or where her own money went. She had income, she worked, but there was never any accounting of it, never a sense that her own money was going toward any of these urgent needs first, before mine. It was always my dollars filling the gap, and her finances were a closed room I wasn't allowed into. Think about how strange that is. In a real partnership, money gets more transparent over time, not less. You start to understand each other's situations. With her, the longer it went, the more one-directional and one-sided the visibility got. I was an open book, and she was a locked drawer. If you're the only one whose money is ever on the table, and you never see how the other person handles their own, that asymmetry of information is itself the sign, separate from the asymmetry of income, which, again, is normal. The 6th sign is about conflict, and it's ugly to admit, every fight ended at the ATM. When there was tension, when I pushed back, when I got frustrated. The resolution, over and over, turned out to be me spending money. Sometimes directly, sometimes I just find myself smoothing things over by agreeing to help with the next thing. I mistook this for generosity. I mistook it for being a good partner who doesn't let disagreements fester. What it actually was, I had trained myself, or been trained, to convert conflict into cash. A relationship where every rough patch gets paved over with your money is not a relationship that's resolving anything. It's a relationship that's discovered the fastest way to make you comfortable again is to let you pay for peace. And I paid, every time, because it felt so much better than sitting in the discomfort. Now here's the mistake underneath all the mistakes. The thing men get most wrong, and the reason I'm so insistent about how I frame this whole video. When it fell apart, my first instinct was the lazy, comforting one. To walk away deciding that women here are like this. That paisas, or Colombians, or Latin women in general, are running a game. And I need to be really direct with you. That conclusion is both false and useless. It's false because I have watched countless men down here build honest, warm, real relationships with women from this exact city. And I've had real relationships myself that had nothing to do with any of this. It's useless because it teaches you to defend against a nationality instead of against a behavior, and a nationality has never taken $1 from anyone. A person did. One specific person, whose specific behaviors I've just spent 15 minutes describing to you. If you take "watch for these 8 behaviors" and swap it for "watch out for women from country X," you have made yourself dumber and more vulnerable, not smarter. Because now you'll trust the wrong people for the right accent, and distrust the right people for the wrong one. And there's a second layer to what men get wrong, and this one's about us, not them. A lot of guys who end up in my old situation aren't just being tricked, they're volunteering. We show up down here wanting to be the provider, the rescuer, the guy whose money makes someone's hard life easier. It feels good. It feels meaningful, especially if you came from somewhere you felt invisible or discarded. And a lot of the men watching this did. I did. 4 months before my wedding, back in Denver, my life detonated, and I came down here in pieces. So when someone let me be the strong one, the one with the resources, the one who could fix things, that fed something in me that had been starving, and a person who's being used is a lot easier to use than a person who isn't. The hunger to be someone's hero is the doorway. I watch foreigners walk through it constantly, guys who don't just get taken, but who make themselves takeable. Because being needed is the drug and the money is just how they buy the next hit. If any part of that landed, sit with it, because that's the part you can actually fix. There was a guy I knew a little back then, older than me, semi-retired, genuinely kind, had landed down in Sabaneta with a woman half his age, and I could see his entire situation from the outside with perfect, effortless clarity. The escalating help, the relatives who materialized only when something was needed, the way his whole face lit up describing how much she needed him. I remember thinking with total confidence, this poor guy has no idea what's happening to him. Now appreciate the joke, because I was 3 months into the exact same thing at the exact same moment, writing my own checks, telling myself mine was different because mine was real. It is always easier to see from the outside, and that's actually useful information you can weaponize, if you can spot it instantly in the guy across the bar, but you can't spot it in your own living room. The problem isn't your eyesight. It's that you don't want to see the thing that's yours. So find one friend who'll be brutally honest with you, and describe your own situation to him as if it's happening to someone else entirely. Then watch his face while you talk. His face will tell you what your excuses have been hiding. So what does it actually take to navigate this without losing your money or your mind? It takes a shift, and the shift is not become cynical. Cynical men get used too. They just feel superior while it happens. The shift is toward being warm and clear at the same time, generous by choice and unmanageable by pressure. Here's the 7th sign, and it doubles as the single most useful test I can give you. The relationship can't survive you saying no. This is the one I wish I'd run in month 2 instead of month 7. At some point, you decline a request. Not cruelly, not with a lecture. Just a normal, warm, I can't do that one. And then you watch. In a real relationship, you say no to something, and the relationship keeps going. Maybe there's a little friction, but the affection doesn't evaporate. The warmth doesn't get yanked. The whole thing doesn't wobble. When I finally started saying no to Catalina, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to say it even once, the temperature dropped through the floor. The affection I described earlier, the incandescence, it switched off like it was on a breaker. And that told me everything the previous 6 signs had been trying to tell me. A connection that only exists as long as the money keeps flowing is not a connection that will survive the word no. So say it once, early, gently, and pay very close attention to what happens next. The answer to, am I being used, is usually hiding in how the other person reacts to a boundary. The first real no I ever gave her, I still remember clearly. It was another ask, a course, a certification, a few $100s, framed as the one thing that would finally turn her situation around. And for once, I don't even know why that particular day, I said I couldn't do it right then. Warmly. Not a lecture, not an accusation, just, not this one, not right now. And the person across the table changed. Not into anger exactly, into distance. A cold, immediate withdrawal, like a door had quietly clicked shut somewhere in the building. The next few days were flat in a way our good stretches never were, and the warmth only came back when I eventually, stupidly, circled around and helped anyway, at which point it returned like sun coming out from behind a cloud. I had just run the test and gotten the single clearest result a person could ask for, and then I deliberately failed it myself, because the cold was so uncomfortable that I paid money to make it stop. Knowing the sign and acting on the sign are 2 completely different skills, and the gap between them is precisely where all of my money went. And the 8th sign is the one that was there from the very beginning, the one I overrode more than any other, my own gut. I knew. Some quiet part of me had flagged the escalating asks, the timed emergencies, the calendar-tracked warmth, months before I let myself consciously see any of it. And every time that quiet voice spoke up, I had an excuse ready. She's under stress. I'm being paranoid. This is just cultural and I don't understand it yet. I'm lucky to be with someone like this. I had a whole library of reasons to not listen to the one instrument that was actually working. If you take nothing else from this, When you catch yourself constructing elaborate explanations for why your discomfort doesn't count, that construction project is the sign. Healthy situations don't require you to constantly talk yourself out of your own instincts. The excuses are the evidence. So, tactically, here's how I move now, and how I'd tell you to move. Keep your finances genuinely separate, especially in the first several months. Not because you're stingy, but because it keeps you seeing clearly while things are still forming. Give freely when you want to give, and it costs you nothing internally, and get very suspicious of any generosity that's pulled out of you by urgency or guilt or the fear of losing warmth. Notice the direction money flows over months, not the size of any single gift. Meet the real people. A real life lets you in eventually. And run the no test early, kindly, and honestly. The kind of man who does well down here isn't the hardest or the richest or the most guarded. It's the one who can hold a boundary and still be genuinely warm, who can say, "I can't do that and I care about you," in the same breath and mean both. The man who buys belonging always runs out of money or runs out of dignity, usually both. The man who can be warm without being managed is the one who actually gets to have the good version of this, and the good version is very good. A few more concrete rules I live by now. Hard one. I don't fund emergencies I can't actually see, and I've made peace with occasionally being wrong about that. If someone I genuinely love hits a real crisis, I want to be part of solving it. But I mean part of it. Present, involved, in the room, not a wire transfer fired off into the fog. There's a real difference between helping a person and funding a story about a person. I keep my own money boring and separate for the first several months, and I don't apologize for it. Anyone who tries to make you feel cheap for not merging finances with someone you've known 8 weeks is telling you something about their intentions, not about your character, and I pay close attention to how giving actually feels in my body. Generosity that comes from abundance feels light. You give it, and you forget it by dinner. Generosity that's been extracted feels heavy. There's a knot, a bracing, a low resentment you have to keep talking yourself out of. That knot is information. For 7 months, I felt that knot almost constantly, and I kept calling it love. It ended in month 7, and it did not end cleanly. When I finally stopped, when the no's started outnumbering the yeses and stayed that way, the relationship didn't survive it, which was, of course, the last and loudest piece of proof I ever needed. There was no dramatic villain reveal. She didn't cackle and hand me an invoice. It simply, quietly dissolved the moment the money stopped, the way a fire goes out when you stop feeding it, and the sheer speed of that going out was its own complete answer. I spent a while afterward being angry, first at her, then, far more usefully, at myself. And somewhere in there I stopped adding up the total, because the number was never really the point, and knowing it to the dollar wouldn't have taught me a thing. What I actually paid for, in the end, was the ability to see all 8 of these coming the next time. Brutally expensive tuition, but I did eventually learn the material, and that is the only reason I get to hand it to you now for free. Let me pull all of this together, because the 8 signs are really just one sign wearing 8 outfits. Money flowing in one direction, under escalating pressure, dressed up as emergency, tracked by affection, walled off from the person's real life and real finances, converted from every conflict, unable to survive a no, while the whole time your own gut is standing in the corner waving at you, and you keep waving it off. That's the pattern. Learn the pattern and you don't need to fear a city, a region, or a nationality ever again. And here's the truth I'll leave you with, the one that cost me the most to actually understand. Real exploiters don't come wearing an ethnicity. They come wearing your own hunger reflected back at you. The reason they're all like that is such a popular story isn't that it's true, it's that it's comfortable. It lets you off the hook for the one thing that was actually yours to own. You drove past 8 warning signs because some part of you wanted the destination more than you wanted the truth. Most of the women you'll meet down here are nothing like this story, and the day I really understood that was the day this stopped being about Colombia and started being about me finally learning to read one human being at a time. If you got something from this, hit subscribe. I'm in a different city every few months, and the next few videos get into the stuff underneath all of this. The rescuer trap, why so many of us end up down here in pieces, and how to actually build something real instead of something you're paying for. See you on the road.